And we'll kick it off. Hello, welcome to Pre-Primary Sources. I'm Liz Nolasco, and I'm here today with Richard Cohen of Zen and the Art of Early Childhood.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
And we're talking today about Piaget and more specifically about egocentrism in preschoolers. Richard, I wonder if you want to kind of introduce yourself and the framework that you're coming from in terms of who you work with and how egocentrism exists within your work, right? How you teach it to your students and kind of any discussions that have come up or why you were interested in this in general or what you've been reading about it.
In addition to my work as a college professor currently, I've been doing professional development with early childhood professionals for well over 30 years. And egocentrism has been one of the most important topics I've always believed to bring up, to introduce, to teach, to reflect on with folks, with early childhood folks, because it has always struck me as so misunderstood or not yet understood. And so I constantly meet professionals and my students now who have never considered the idea and so misinterpret young children's behaviors as if they were their own and then respond to them in inappropriate ways, not understanding the concept of egocentrism. And to me, it's one of the basic understandings of being a great early childhood professional.
I love that. I in preparation I kind of did a my attempt at a survey of what's out there, right? So which is a Reddit search of the ECE professional subreddit and others.
Mm,
And
okay.
I found a couple of lines that I thought were they reflect a common understanding of egocentrism, I think within the field and probably of parents who have done a little bit of reading up on child development as well.
Right.
So one person said meanness, this was in a thread about children being mean. One person
Mhm.
said meanness is basically not outgrowing the egocentric stage. They don't have a lot of
Hmm.
empathy, so they don't care when others are upset. I should preface this with I am offering these without commentary yet. I don't necessarily agree or disagree with the things that I will be saying.
All right. Am I allowed to
Um,
agree or disagree with them?
oh, please, what's your gut check here?
Well, I've rarely, if ever, experienced meanness from a young child because I understand egocentrism, because I understand young children. Um, I don't tend to interpret their behaviors as mean. Um, I rarely encounter a young child that intends harm on another. Or, I mean, certainly there are, but they don't, I'm not sure they understand what they're doing when it's happening. So I'm not sure I could call it mean. Um, so that's my initial response to that comment.
Interesting. I like that idea, the that they don't necessarily have that long-term view of meanness. It might be more of a this gets a response or this is something that I can do. Let's see what happens, right? More
Well, it may be a
investigative.
self-centered action, but
Hmm.
so many people in our society misinterpret self-centered.
Hmm.
They think that the adult definition of self-centered is what they are applying to young children. And self-centeredness is developmentally appropriate. It's healthy. It's not bad or mean.
That is the perfect entree.
Okay.
So we were talking before we started recording about Piaget's mountain task, and this is where this idea of children who are in the pre-operational stage
Hmm.
conceive of themselves and others, and where this idea of egocentrism comes in, right? Where it
Came from,
exists.
yes.
So I'm going to share this
Because I think
video.
at some point in this conversation, we need to question Piaget a little bit.
Oh, okay. I'm very excited for this. Uh,
Okay. So while Liz is looking for it, this is a very famous experiment that Piaget did, perhaps with just his two own daughters in their living room to determine this. And there may be some fallacies in there, but it'll be interesting to see.
yes. Can you see the video?
I can now, yes.
Or the start of the screen. Perfect. So this is from Wonder Years, The Science of Early Childhood Development, which is a collaboration between the University of Minnesota and the Science Museum of Minnesota funded
Hmm.
by the National Science Foundation. I'll put the link in the show notes as well for people who are listening because it's not going to be quite as impactful if you're just hearing
Oh,
it.
yep.
Yes,
No
thank
Zoom.
you. So
But
it's not,
already I'll point out that
hold
what
on.
we're seeing is different than Piaget's experiment.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
In the what I've seen is the tallest mountain is in front of the child, and the smaller
Mhm.
mountains are behind them.
To purposefully block the
Yeah.
the view, is that okay?
Yes.
Let me try to share this one more time.
Here, the adult and child sit at opposite sides of the table. They can see one side of the mountain scene in front of them. Once they've had a chance to look at the mountain, the adult asks the child to point to which of the four mountain scenes that the adult can see.
That was all that I think is the
Okay.
context that listeners who might be unfamiliar would need, right? So the concept of egocentrism is very physical, right? It's very centered in what the child can see and feel and hear and experience.
Right.
Um, and so, Richard, I wonder if you can make the connection for me between the mountain task, right? Being able to imagine what someone else is literally seeing from another perspective and emotional imagination that we kind of think of when we think of children as egocentric.
Hmm. Let's see. I'm not sure where to go with that. To make the connection between what they're seeing with the mountains and their sort of emotional intellect.
Mhm.
Um, well, first of all, I
I
would have
like
liked,
this.
what's
Mhm.
that?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would like to have seen a little bit more of that. I see that the older girl went around the table to see it from another perspective. I don't know if
Mhm.
the younger boy was invited to do so and what his response might have been had he been allowed to also view the table from the other side.
My
I
understanding is
don't know how the
procedurally it would have been
question.
the same, but I don't know if that was
Go ahead. What? Say it
my
again.
understanding is the procedure was the same, but you're right. I don't think that
Hmm.
was documented well in this, if it was following the established procedure.
And I wonder how the question was proposed to each of them. Um, And I guess I say all that, and I'm not sure I'm actually answering your question, Liz, but I say all that because I think you and I have anecdotally experienced many ways in which young and very young children can take others' perspectives in a way that seem to contradict Piaget's theory.
Yes, and that was why that was kind of a trick question, because this is the experiment that people see when they understand egocentrism. And yet they deduce that that means that they are self-centered or only self-interested and not able to take others' emotions and experiences into account.
Right.
And that was kind of the crux of why I am particularly passionate about this.
Well, one of the things
I
I know
think,
about you, Liz, is that you're very interested, very passionate about moral development. And
right.
so there's some talk, some theories around moral development that seem to stem from this um, understanding or misunderstanding about egocentrism that make me feel concerned.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what uh, put it back in here
Goldberg?
later. Kohlberg, yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Kohlberg said is very much tied to this idea. It's very much deeply tied to Piaget's stage. And Piaget did also write about children's moral development separately
Mm,
from this. And yeah, there is this idea that children can only morally process what they're seeing. They can't hypothesize about others' emotions. They can't take other people's perspectives. And there's the truth in that is that, of course, they need experience, right? No one's going to get behind a car and drive the Indy 500. No one is going to be born and understand how other people are going to feel in response to what they are doing. And that idea of the ego being, physically centered is so different than what children are actually living in their emotional lives. And I do want to touch on what Piaget said directly about this in The Child's Conception of the World. So he says he also uses it pronouns for children, which feels really weird. And
yes.
like in general, I suspect it was both the fact that it's a translation and just the era that this was written, and this is from 1929. Um, that the child shows a keen interest in himself, a logical and no doubt a moral egocentricity, does not prove that he is conscious of his self, but suggests, on the contrary, that he confuses his self, like his experience, with the universe. In other words, that he is unconscious of his self. So this is
Hmm.
saying that it's not that the child is egocentric and they're the only thing that matters. It's that they are so connected to everything else that they can't imagine that they're separate.
Oh, that's fascinating. And Piaget said that?
That was, yeah, that was out of the
Wow.
child's conception of the world,
Good for him.
right? It feels like a very modern, modern
It really
sense.
does, right?
Yeah, so I'm
Very
curious what your reaction there is.
well. You and I have seen 2-year-olds who see one of their peers cry and go to
Mhm.
comfort them. So, in that moment, there's an understanding that the other child is experiencing something different from them, and there's something within themselves, or maybe something they've observed in their short lives that caused them to reach out to the child who seems to be in distress.
Yes. I had a conversation a long time ago with a friend of a friend who was asking about why I liked working in early childhood. And I said, oh, it's amazing because you can really see this human nature towards empathy and altruism.
Yes.
And he asked a really interesting question, which was, well, how do you know it's altruism and not how do I make this kid stop screaming? Uh,
Oh.
which set me back for a second, right? And I do still believe it's altruism and empathy, but I had to think on why, right? And I think it's in part reflected by the distress on the child who's seeing this. And I think it connects to this idea of the child doesn't necessarily separate themselves from everything else around them.
Hmm.
You're sad. I'm sad that you're sad. How can we all feel better about this? Right?
Right, right. I would think that with a traditional definition of egocentrism, if a child wanted another child to stop shouting, they might shout themselves at them to be quiet.
Right.
But they don't. They reach out a comforting hand because they've seen me as the teacher do that to children. Or maybe it's just something within themselves that compels them to do that. But it strikes me as quote unquote the beginnings of moral development.
It's easy to see in an abstract in the like a positive sense, right? Where you see a child helping another. And I think it's almost harder to disconnect it when you see behaviors that some educators would call, mean-spirited or selfish, right?
Right,
They look like adult behaviors that are mean-spirited or selfish. And
right.
so it's this idea that children are inherently egocentric and only self-interested. Maybe that's where the line needs to be drawn, right? Egocentric, I see things from one perspective versus self-interested, which is I only care about this one perspective.
Mm. Care starts off early in our human lives is a really fascinating one. And what causes it to start? Does it come from within or is it from something we've modeled? But either way, it's fascinating to consider that what we're seeing is care.
Absolutely. Right. And that's where that autonomy, that independent drive comes in as well, right? Children can't do what they haven't experienced. And
Right,
yet there's a processing between, receiving a hug when you're sad and giving a hug when someone else is sad. There's an
right.
understanding that has to happen. And if we're saying that children can't do that until they're 7 or 8 years old, we're really discounting a lot of what I think everyone who's been around children has observed of young children.
100%. 100%. Uh, I love being around children because my brain has long since been trained to not interpret their behaviors in that way. So I sit in wonder at the caring behaviors I see in young children and the seemingly empathetic behaviors I see in young children um, is just fascinating to me. Whereas when I see a president of the United States behaving in a similar way, it's incredibly concerning to me because it's not developmentally appropriate and it is self-centered in a negative
And I'm
way.
going to push back a little bit because I don't think that the behavior you're talking about in the adult is similar to the behavior you're seeing in the child.
Oh, say more about that.
I think that when we call adults childish, right, as an insult, I think we're misaligning or misinterpreting the child's behavior and the way it exists in the adult. I think there's
Mm,
such a line between a child saying, I'm the greatest. This is that there's no one better than I am at this. And an adult saying it because the intention is different. The experience of this is different. A child who, my own child is 5, and he was in the car the other day talking about how he is the smartest boy. And man, I am glad my 5-year-old can sit in the car and say, I am the smartest boy. I know everything there is to know about bugs.
Right.
Because yes, there's growth mindset, there's humility, and that will come in time. But it's good for a 5-year-old to say, I am just the smartest bug person. Um, Whereas for an adult to say that, it's such an intentional shutting down of the rest of the world. And I think that's where this, again, egocentrism becomes misconstrued, right? We see that behavior, we call it childish, but it's not childish. It's something different. It's selfish. It's gross, but it's not the same thing that children are doing.
Right. Well, I want to clarify what I said earlier. I didn't actually say that that person was being childish. I said he was being self-centered, because
Mhm.
I have long lived my life with tremendous respect for children. And so to say someone is childish for me is not a negative statement. I
Right.
would never call that man childish, because I understand too much about childhood. But I think that phrase self-centered has two distinctly different interpret or definitions, whether it's applied to a child or an adult, when you understand child
Yes.
development.
Absolutely. I think that comes into the enduringness of the conception of children as egocentric to mean that they are selfish, and why it's kind of endured within early childhood spaces.
It has.
I feel like there's maybe a utility to it that's maybe serves to support children's development. Maybe this idea, if we keep in mind, if we have in mind that children are egocentric, meaning self-centered,
Right.
which, yes,
In a
literally,
healthy
right,
way.
meaning
Yeah.
emotionally selfish, right?
No, I wouldn't say that, but okay.
Well, for this interpretation, that's not what it
Okay.
means, but it's
Got
how
it.
it's being interpreted. I
Understood.
think it does serve utility to make the adult more intentional about how they support a child through emotionally difficult situations, right, or conflicts. And I suspect that that's why this sort of popular understanding has endured over the clinical understanding.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we have a lot of people in our field who believe their job is to teach children right from wrong and good from bad, and to
Mhm.
respond when they're behaving badly or in a not nice way. And if we misinterpret egocentrism, we we is this a word? Misrespond to what is happening right in front of us.
Right. I wonder, this may be a half-baked thought because it just came to me, sorry. But this idea of what Piaget was saying, right? The child doesn't separate himself from the rest of the universe. And
Right.
the way conflicts might escalate, right? One child hits another, whether by accident or on purpose, and the other one goes around and decks them because that's what just happened to them. This
Right.
idea of that egocentrism of being, this is what is happening in the world right now, might help to remove some of the intentionality and help us as the adults kind of pause and assess the situation and say, oh, this isn't a child becoming a bully or being bullied or, um, imposing these adult and much more mature ideas on very young children. But
Yes.
instead, it's the child adapting to the environment around them that is constantly changing. And then as they get older and they recognize some more consistency, hopefully, some more consistency and care and receive that care through their environments, they're able to then temper that quick response,
Right. Right.
regardless of what it is.
Yes. And in your scenario, each of those two children had different intentions in that moment of hitting. And so understanding that would then invite me to respond differently to each of those children, even though the behavior appeared to be the same.
Absolutely. And that's a higher level of teaching, I think, to be able to really distinguish
Right.
those two things.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
been for me a lifelong commitment to helping people understand that and maybe invite them to notice things in a more complex way than they had been.
yeah, and being able to build to that through an understanding of child development and an understanding of
Right.
educator development that can lead to supporting that.
Yes. Because we
Um,
have people like me, for example, who
Mhm.
was hit as a kid by other kids, who was beat up by bullies. And so until I really learned and understood this way of thinking and took it on, I might have gotten very triggered by that scene that you just described, because it would have brought up a lot of old painful feelings for me. And then I would have responded harshly to both of them. And so I do need to work on my own stuff and continue to learn about child development in order to be the best early childhood professional I can be.
Right. And there's that the lens of experience, right? But as adults, we get to call it the lens of experience. For children, it's egocentrism as the world is as I perceive it, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that sort of connects to another Piaget line, also from the child's conception of the world. The child is a being whose principal activity is adaptation and who is seeking to adapt itself not only to the adult who surrounds it, but to nature itself.
Yeah.
So
What do you think about that?
I feel like it's connected, right? Because it's adapting to the surrounding people, the surrounding environment, and the way the world exists. And w all the while without immediately distinguishing the self from the surroundings, right? When we think about this idea of self-concept, self-esteem, when the child is adapting to a, a world where the adults around them are nasty, are critical, are not uh, caring, right? Not demonstrating care.
Right.
They are part of this world where their experience is, okay, well, surely I deserve this, right? The adult is acting this way, and I am part of everything else. So I guess this is who I am. This is how I should be responded to.
hmm
Um, in the same way that they can't separate from in a on the other hand, a child who has been loved and embraced by family and treated very well by people, right? It's yes, this is how people should be treated, and they give that back as they grow. This is my experience, this is how the world works, and this is how I fit into this world as the self separates from the broader world.
Yes. Yeah. Isn't that in light of what you were reading from Piaget that I had forgotten about? That in Piaget's view, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, growth is a continual sense of me being reminded that I'm separate from the universe when I could have sworn I was the universe. And it's kind of a sad view to me. Um, when our job is to invite interdependence and connectivity and relationships. And yet, according to Piaget, our conception is that we're constantly learning we're separate from everyone else. It's kind of sad.
That does, right, yeah, I hadn't heard it put that way before, and yeah, that that is huh. I wonder how that ties into, again, that learning how to be with people, right? When it's not, I am an echo of the universe, but I
Mhm.
can make echoes out into the universe, how that distinction works.
Well, we know that in the pre-operational stage, uh, that is when they are learning that they can have impact on the world. Um,
Hmm.
they can produce something, Ericksonian thinking, they can produce something that wasn't there before. They begin to realize
Hmm.
around age 3. But I
Right.
never really viewed it in terms of separation, maybe impelling them to do that. I don't know.
I could see that sort of a drive to reconnect
Mm.
being what really makes that happen, I
Yeah, isn't
think.
that interesting way of seeing it? Yeah.
Um, because I mean
The other thing
that's
I
the
was
only
going to bring
part.
up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
Oh no, I'm just saying that's the only part that I can see as a just such a deep human need for connection. I could see
Yes.
that perhaps repairing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to also wanted, what I came to this podcast wanting to also bring to the conversation, when I teach about egocentrism, is the corollary. Is that the right idea? The related idea that young children don't yet understand. No, sorry, let me start again. Young children don't yet distinguish between what they are doing and who they are being. And they don't understand, maybe, um, when the teacher says stop hitting, they don't understand that hitting is not welcome. They, being egocentric, they believe I am bad. There's something wrong with me because they can't yet distinguish between the things I do and who I am as a being.
Okay, I have complicated thoughts on this one
Okay, go for it.
because
And maybe I'm
um
wrong. Tell me.
no, I did not set out to argue. I just
Okay.
I'm trying to compose. I mean,
All
maybe
right.
that's where we're gonna end up, but I I'm totally with you on the child's um hearing feedback and responding as a that is because their experience is so moment to moment,
Right.
that feedback can be, all consuming, right? That
That's right.
it becomes this is what I am versus whoops, shouldn't have done that. Um,
Exactly.
and as an adult, I struggle with the idea that we are more than our actions because I think our actions are who we are. So I am sort of just processing this idea of course, I can look at a child who smacked somebody because they had the block that they wanted, and that was the way of getting the block, and say, well, of course, the child's not bad, but they're learning. Um, and I guess I'm wondering in terms of child guidance, then, if a child, I mean, are we seeing the child as fragile and, you know, going to be harmed by being corrected, or are we seeing the child as able to take in that information, or are we seeing the educator or the parent in this scenario as having to kind of thread a needle of correcting without, or how to correct without causing emotional harm, right?
Well, I definitely didn't mean to imply that it meant young children were fragile.
Hmm.
Um, I don't believe that. Um, we could talk about resiliency and plasticity and all those good things. But for me, what it's always meant is that when I see a child hit another child, I always will say, I try to always say, I love you no matter what, but hitting is not allowed in this classroom. And I'm always,
Hmm.
or if someone wants to sit on my lap and there's just too many kids fighting for um, my lap is really tired, right? I love you all, but my lap
Hmm.
needs just some air right now. It needs to just sit by itself. And I'm always trying to make abstract ideas concrete so that
Hmm.
egocentric young thinkers don't misinterpret it as being about their self-worth.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's not about the child, it's about this behavior, it's
The
about this
behavior.
setting, this thing. Yeah. No, that makes
I
perfect sense.
believe that young children can't differentiate between their behavior and their self.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's corroborated by research or not.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, you've given me things to read up on because I don't,
Hey,
yeah, I don't know. Um,
if
I've
I
never
can
heard
give
a
Liz
child.
Nolasco things to read, more things to read about, then I have done my job.
Thank you, thank you. I've said before, my love language is homework, so I appreciate it. Uh, yeah, I do wonder, right? Because I've never been in a preschool classroom where a child separates themselves like verbally, but obviously that verbal communication is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the child's actual experience that they don't necessarily have language for. So I am curious how that would play out, how one would experiment in that child's inner experience.
Well, what do you
And
mean separates themselves verbally?
oh, sorry, like makes an excuse like, oh no, my hand hit them, I didn't hit them, right? That kind of disconnection
Oh,
between,
I've never experienced that, I don't think.
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I haven't either,
Yeah.
but that idea of whether they are or are not their behaviors in that moment, right? Does that make sense?
Well, we want them to take responsibility and learn how to
Right.
behave in the world properly. And
Hmm.
so those are the things we want for them, but it's unclear from a child development perspective if they're picking up what we're putting down.
Right. So you're
or
talking about
understood.
like the reasoning for like why they should do certain things or not do certain things?
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't you say that egocentrism precedes or occurs along with the beginnings of logical reasoning?
Right. That's certainly what Piaget would say. Get
Right,
moving towards the formal operations
right. So they may
eventually.
not understand yet. And I have to know not to take that personally, not to get angry for them because they didn't respond in a way that demonstrated they understood.
Hmm.
That's all on me and how I
Right.
facilitate that moment.
Yeah. And so to bring that back to the child's egocentrism, the idea that we are one and the same as the child, I think just again shines a light on how important it is for that educator to be self-reflective and composed to the best of their ability, right?
Right,
It's hard to say to a field that is largely without employer-sponsored health insurance, but therapy, paying attention to yourself, knowing your own background, your own triggers, and the things that are going to uh, upset you, right?
right. I've
Figuring out
often
where
said in
you
order
play
to
a
become a
role.
great professional, I have to do my own personal work because early childhood is such a human field that I bring my personhood to my work, whether I like it or not. So I have to do my work there to heal my wounds
Of course. And
if I
this
want to
is
be a
the
great
opportunity.
professional.
Absolutely. And this is the time to plug Tamar Jacobson's Don't Get So Upset, right?
There
That's,
you go.
I cannot tell you how many people I've given that book to. Um,
Mm,
if you're listening and haven't read it, it's not a long read, but it is invaluable, I think, for all professionals.
indeed.
Um, and yeah, well, thank you, Richard, for engaging with me on this egocentric
You-
topic.
You're welcome. It was fascinating. Thank you for inviting me.
Is there anything you'd like to plug before we go,
Uh,
or how people should find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. I want to just remind people that I'm on Facebook and Instagram, as you said at the beginning of the podcast. It's called Zen and the Art of Early Childhood. And every day I post early childhood related posts that are meant to inspire, educate, make you laugh. I invite you to join me there. And in addition to my being a college professor, I'm invited around the world to give keynote addresses at early childhood conferences and do professional development trainings. So please invite me to your community. I'd love to learn with you.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Richard. I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Liz. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Did you know that you can support pre-primary sources and all of the other early childhood nerdwork shows and get Discord access and special perks for all the nerdy talk your heart desires? Head to the Patreon link and show notes or search Early Childhood Nerdwork on Patreon.